Hello, my name is Dan Bauer and I'm the Superintendent of Danvers Public Schools, and welcome to Superintendent's Corner. This week we have Miss Christina Ryan, our Director of Student Services, who's joining us, and the purpose is really again to talk about areas of our district that maybe the public they don't have as much knowledge about, but also celebrate our successes. But before we begin, I'd love to thank Miss O'Neill's class for producing, filming, and all the editing, as well as Miss O'Neill for bringing them together. And also I'd like to thank DCAT, who has provided this great space for the show today. So how are we doing, Miss Ryan?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Great. Well, welcome, and we're so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I'll lead off with a few questions, and,
Sure.
and if there's anything at the end that you'd like to add, please do so.
Okay.
All right, well, really the first question is, share a little bit about your background and what has brought you to become the Director of Student Services.
Sure. I began my career as a teacher, and so first I was a special education teacher at a middle school as well as an elementary school. I was also a general educator at a middle school. After those pieces, I really realized there was a disconnect between the paperwork process as well as the teaching and learning piece. So I then shifted into a role as a team chairperson and then a district coordinator. The majority of my career at that point was between preschool and middle. I realized that there was definitely a disconnect at all levels between what you're doing at that moment in time versus the greater good. So from that point, I then shifted to become an assistant director to really help look at that perspective. And so what might have been happening at one moment in time in an elementary school classroom made sense for that moment. But there were some times where a decision was made that impacted potentially a decision later on at high school that nobody really had any knowledge of. So I thought it was really important to make sure that I saw things from a pre-K to age 22 perspective. And so when I became an assistant director, I was able to really spend some quality time at the secondary level, specifically at high school, and then really looking to see what out-of-district placements were being utilized frequently, and really what were some of those components that we could be bringing to district programs. And so after I completed those pieces, I really realized that I was ready for a director role, and I was thrilled to be chosen as the candidate here.
Well, we're so glad that you're here, and you're in year 2. And time is flying, but
Yes.
We're so glad that you're here. And really, I think one of the things, your job is very challenging because it encompasses so many things. But the bottom line is really it's all about what's best for students, right? So talk a little bit about the mission of Student Services and talk about your vision as Director of Student Services, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I think one of the pieces that's really important is to think about how are we maximizing services for all of our students. And so when I was hired, I met with several parents and teachers who said, it's not really clear what happens after this moment in time. And so one of the pieces that my team has really been fortunate to do is really make sure that there is a vertical alignment so that if you're an elementary parent, you can see what available opportunities are at the secondary level. If you are a high school parent and you're really wondering what's going to happen after high school, we have a pathway for that. And so I think that's really important. And so part of that really has been making sure that our programs are really staffed appropriately. So when we entered, we realized that people were working really, really hard, but we didn't necessarily have enough staff in certain programs to really be able to maximize student progress. And so really the work we did last year was conducting several audits to really show what our programs were doing well, and then what were the components that we could really add to make sure that our programs were not only aligned, but really competitive with other districts and out-of-district programming. And so the piece that was really concrete was staffing. And so that's something that you and our central cabinet has really been very, very supportive of us doing, is making sure that we have the right staff in the right places to make sure that all students can succeed.
And I think that's important to note is that, needs are complicated, right? And resources are all limited. We know the challenge really is providing that service that students deserve, but also one that works within the confines of the district, right? So would you mind highlighting some of the areas that you and your team are working with to improve services?
Sure. So we have a series of specialized programs in district that now span pre-K through age 22. And so that's really where we have made sure that we have had audits completed. Last year we made sure that we had learning cohorts of like learners, because that's really a piece of the puzzle, is that you might be a special education teacher, but if you have students who are working at a variety of different levels, students aren't really going to make progress in that kind of environment. So it's really thinking about what methodologies students require, who's the best person to deliver that service. And so we had many people who were trained, but they might not have been working in the right place at the right time to really utilize their skill set. And so I would say that's something that we're really cognizant of, is making sure that people have the right training, the resources, which could be curriculum and staffing, and really supported their building administrative team to make sure that their students can be successful.
And one thing that I think you've done a wonderful job is really molding your team, right? And would you mind talking a little bit about your team?
Sure. I'm very fortunate to have a very strong team, and we all have a different background, which I think makes our team so versatile. So Derek Munyon is our assistant director at the elementary level. His background is a BCBA. He worked in out-of-district placements as well as district programming, and was a program director in another district. Alongside him, we have Sue Donatel, who is our new assistant director at the secondary level, and she spent the majority of her career as a school psychologist, and she also was a middle school coordinator for quite some time. Then we also have Angelique DeCoste, who's our out-of-district coordinator, and she is an SLP by trade, but has spent a majority of her career really working with students with language-based difficulties. And so together, I think we bring a broad skill set, and I, as a former special educator and general education teacher, I think it really helps us understand the needs of students at a different level.
I agree, and your team is wonderful. I think having the variety of backgrounds really lends itself to, creating programs, but also looking for ways that, and it's going to lead into our next question, is silos, right? And it's not unique to Danvers or any other district that oftentimes you'll have silos where, they're not really connected, such as in this case, special education and general education. So what are some of the things that you are doing or your team is doing to help bridge those gaps to basically bring the silos down?
I think one of the key pieces we're working on is literacy with our general education colleagues. And so when we entered last year, we surveyed all of our staff to really see who was trained in certain reading methodologies, where were those people working. And we realized that we didn't necessarily have people who were trained in the areas that we really needed to do so. And so fortunately, our curriculum team has had reading specialists for quite some time who's been doing the majority of that work. But in doing all of that work, that means there are less students that they might be able to be seeing if they were also responsible for delivering all specialized services for students with disabilities. So we really looked at how can we maximize grant funding to make sure that we're training people at the buildings to make sure that students can receive the right instruction at the right time within their home school. And so Julie Pasternak, our elementary curriculum director, has been super supportive, and we worked really well together last summer to really make sure that we utilize grant funding to bring a course to our district called Dyslexia Instruction That's Targeted. We had Dr. Melissa Orkin, who is a clinical psychologist, come in and train our staff. We did that optional PD in the spring. We also did it this fall. We then led another training called RAVO, which is another reading program, and we trained our special educators and reading specialists this fall. And then with Julie's support, we were able to purchase the resources in order to allow our educators to be able to utilize that programming. So I think that is very different, because for a long time, many of us in the field were taught that we were teaching literacy in a different way that has now been scientifically debunked. And so really we have a lot of people who are in the field who were trained really in a way of teaching reading that's no longer relevant. And so we really need to make sure that we're constantly training our staff and making sure they have the resources necessary.
Well, and a lot of strides have been made that way. And this kind of leads into the next question where, there have been a lot of successes with not only student services, but in general within our district. Would you mind sharing some of those successes that you might not see on the surface?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, so I would say the reading piece is definitely a huge one. Another piece would really be the way the schedule has been designed. So the support of our general ed colleagues as well as principals and our curriculum team has really allowed us to make master schedules to really think about our students with disabilities first. So what we don't want is to have a schedule where we're trying to fit our students in after the fact. So at all buildings, everybody has been on board with, yes, let's schedule these students first, let's make sure they can receive all of their services, and how do we then need to change the way that we're doing things as a whole to make sure that everybody is getting what they need. And so I would say that's a huge celebration. That's something that happened before I arrived, but that's just something that's ingrained in the culture here, which has been very helpful as far as making sure that students have access to everything.
That's critical, and I think this kind of relates to the silo question, but really we're working hard to improve student achievement across the district. And certainly that's for all students. So could you talk a little bit about that piece?
Sure. There are some pieces that have been working really well, let's say in one setting, and for some reason may not be replicated in another setting. And so in looking at data this year, we really started to look at what's working well and then how can we make sure that there's a continuum. So at the elementary level, the reading team really has an MTSS process for reading that's strong and has really made some great gains for our students. We looked at what we were doing in the middle school, which was something completely different. And so this year we really talked about how do we take what's working in the middle school and transition that, what's working in the elementary school and transition that to the middle school. And Julie and I met with everybody, and all of our administrative team were really on board with absolutely. So we've done some assessments. We've made sure that we are using the same screening measures, that we're looking at data over time. So if you are a parent of a 7th grader, you can go back to grade 1 and see how your student has progressed since grade 1. So when students are transitioning to, let's say, a time that is typically difficult for all students, we're taking one piece away by saying we already have this figured out.
Right, that transition from 5th to 6th grade, which is a challenge, and certainly from 8th to 9th, which is huge. I want to shift gears a little bit here, and you mentioned earlier that staffing is always a critical issue to ensure that our programs have what they need. But could you talk a little bit about some of the work you've done with our instructional assistants and behavior techs?
Sure.
The narrative has really changed a lot. We meet with the leadership group of the instructional assistants, behavior techs on a regular basis, and just so impressed with the work that is being done. But would you mind highlighting some of that?
Sure.
Because I think they really are. Our educators are awesome, but really the support staff, they're behind the scenes that have connected to all the success. And really, quite frankly, we need everybody on the same page, and they are doing the work day in and day out.
They absolutely are. And I really thank their leadership team for bringing concerns to our attention so that we can address those pieces. And one of the things that was really loud and clear last year was our student population is different than it was 10 to 15 years ago, and really thinking about what training and skills they need to be able to support students. And so oftentimes, if something is happening in real time, there might not be time for them to ask a teacher or someone else, like, oh, what do you think I should do right here, right now? And they're figuring it out. And so they had really said it would be great if we could have some behavior training, if we could talk about some scenarios. And so we really got together and thought about what are the most common issues that you face in a day-to-day, which were different depending on levels, or maybe it was the same issue, but there was different language used at levels. And so what we did was we brought in a consultant who had done one of our audits, Constellations Behavioral Services, and they led a 3-hour training in really behavior management and some key strategies. That was really well received. And then afterwards, the IAs and BTs said, great, we want more. And we actually wanted about students at our level or that maybe we work with. So then we met again and said, okay, how can we do this? So then Derek, Sue, and I led a training where we really took those, top 10 situations that we hear about, and we role played, and we made sure that we really took some time to meet with everybody and talk about those successes. And so we have a plan for a continuation of that throughout this year that's really level by level, because if you're a preschool assistant, what you are dealing with might be more physically challenging than if you're a high school assistant. But if students are really having a difficult time, we want you to be able to respond based on the student and their preferences, as well as what you're comfortable with. And so I'm really excited about the work that we have moving ahead.
I'm so excited with that too, because a lot of it's feedback from our instructional assistants and behavior techs for what do they need help in areas to be successful in their setting. So it's great that we have that relationship. But one other area that I think is important, and it may be unique to our district, I'm not sure that many other districts have this, but is a mentorship program with our instructional assistants and behavior techs. And would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So last year, some of the feedback was really around retention. And so we were hiring instructional assistants who were saying to us really within their first 90 days, like, this isn't the job that I thought it was. And so a piece of that really led to what did our job descriptions look like. And last year we really made a conscious effort to we have, I think, 5 to 7 job descriptions, so that as you're applying for a job, those job descriptions look different based on the students that you'll be serving. And so in doing that, we really talked about, okay, now that we have these descriptions, wouldn't it be great if there was somebody who had that same role? So if you had questions, you had a go-to person. And our IABT team really said, like, this would be great, we would love to do this, and how can we do it? So I would really thank you, Dr. Bauer, for leading the charge and saying, great, let's figure out a way to do this. So we did research other towns. We did have an aspiring special education administrator who was really excited about partnering with us, and then together we really started to map out what this could look like. And so this year we meet monthly. We have a series of topics, and Shannon Chan, who's the president of our union, she and I meet with our team, and we are doing some professional development, we're doing some coaching, and then we're really figuring out how to continue to have staff feel supported in their roles.
I applaud and thank you, but it takes a team, right? There was a lot of people that came into creating that vision, and it feels really good. And I had an opportunity to see one of the mentor sessions, and you helped work with Ms. Chan on that, and it was outstanding just to see some of our newer people in the field where we know that their work is so critical, but yet there isn't a mentor program really out there for helping making that transition to wherever they need to, services they provide. We have that for teachers, right? So we have that, so we're adding layers of professionalism across the board, which I think is critical, improve services. I want to shift gears again, and a big part of your job is connecting lots of stakeholders.
Yes.
So would you mind talking a little bit about that and connecting to stakeholders and the community and others and how important that work is?
Yes, absolutely. So when we first arrived last year, there were several parents who were really excited to come and meet with us. Some people had really positive experiences that they wanted to share, and some people had a negative experience that they really wanted to share and said, I don't want this to happen to someone else. And so I would say we are always open and love to meet with families individually, because when parents are talking about their children with disabilities, it's really hard to do that in a public forum. So when we can have those individual conversations, that's so powerful, because every student has a story. And so every family has said, if this didn't happen then, maybe this would be different. Or here's something that you might not have realized really impacted our family in a positive way. And if everybody knew this was available, this would be different. And so really that's what we're here to do, is to hear those stories and have parents and students feel successful. As far as staff is concerned, we lead a series of meetings with different stakeholders. So whether it's a monthly meeting with our school psychologist or a weekly meeting with our team chairs, we have a lot of standing meetings just so that people have a time and a space to be able to share successes, challenges, and really problem solve. And so last year I did that as a way to get to know people, and I was thrilled that people really wanted to continue to do that. And so people are happy and willing to meet outside of their day to just have a checkpoint to say, here are some things that really aren't going well and we'd like to change them, or this used to work and how come we're not doing that anymore? And so that's been really helpful with our new team.
I think that's awesome, and I've seen elements of that, and I've been invited to a few of the meetings, which I appreciate facilitating them, and certainly CPAC has been doing a lot of great things behind the scenes, but also public facing. I don't know if you'd like to share some of the work you've been doing with CPAC.
I would love to. We have a brand new CPAC, and they have really been very communicative about how we can meet regularly, what events we can plan together, and really what's our vision. So that if we have a vision, a shared vision together, how is everything that we're doing tied to that? And so they really came up with an idea for us to apply for an institute that really helps CPACs and districts collaborate on a vision. And so we were fortunate to be accepted into the Apple Institute, and so we are meeting to really craft that vision for our district, and I'm really excited to see where that goes, and then hopefully come to school committee and share a little bit more about that with our CPAC.
Awesome. Great. We are coming up on our time, and you've covered lots of ground, but I do want to lead into a question. Basically, we have great support from our community, right? And we're very fortunate. And certainly one of the charges we've been provided with is to improve student services, right? Because that improves the quality of the whole experience for everybody. And we know that it's going to take time to bring substantive change, and a lot of things have been happening. But what are some of the next steps? Like how much more? That's probably a poor way of saying it, right? Because there's always room for improvement, but there are some things on the horizon that we're really closing in on. Would you mind sharing
Sure.
a little bit about that?
Absolutely.
I hope that makes sense.
That makes sense. So we did a lot of work last year, thankfully, with all the support of the town, to really make sure that we highlighted some staff that were really necessary for our programs. And so over time, I think people have been working really hard using the resources that they have at their disposal, but we were always short. And so in order to run successful programs, you have to have enough staff and the right staff to be able to do that. And so one of the pieces about having an out-of-district coordinator is that person is able to say, well, these are the programs that we're competing with. This is what they're offering. And so we really looked at that and said, if they're offering that, we could do that better here. And what would it cost us to be able to do that here, or what pieces are missing? And so we've really spent this year doing a cost analysis to say, for us to run a program, these are the missing components. And we're really close. We only need a couple staff members to really have a true program that would be a mirror image potentially of an out-of-district program. And why that's important is because if you're a parent and you are touring those programs, you want to be able to compare and contrast what is it that they have that Danvers doesn't have. And I want our team to be able to say we have all those things and more. And so we are very close to that really coming to fruition, which we're excited about.
That's very exciting. A lot of hard work,
Yep.
right? And appreciate the effort of yourself, the team, but also all that have been involved, you know, and also the community support as well as the town support. This does bring us to the conclusion. Is there anything maybe that I left out or anything you'd like to add?
No, I would just say that this has been a wonderful experience. I'm thrilled to be here. Our team is really happy to be here, and it's been so wonderful to be part of making change that's really benefiting students. So thank you for having us.
Well, great. Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing time and helping spread the great word of all that is happening with student services. And we appreciate you being here today, Ms. Ryan.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So that concludes today's episode of Superintendent's Corner. Stay tuned for the next edition. Have a great day.